Good morning, church. Thank you for joining us for our New Testament challenge. Today we're in Hebrews chapter 5. Remember at the end of Hebrews chapter 4 when Christ was called the high priest, that he was a high priest who could identify with us. And it's a great picture of how he's unique in the position he has as being all God but all man. Well, remember, Hebrews has that Jewish audience, and the moment he says that, the Jewish audience would raise their hand and say, wait a minute, Christ is in the line of David. He's not a Levite. How can he be our high priest? Well, that's answered in chapter 5, and it's answered in a pretty deep answer when it says that Christ is a high priest in the line of Melchizedek. Now, if you want to, you can go to the Old Testament and you can see where Abraham makes an offering to Melchizedek, who kind of comes out of nowhere and he's serving God and we don't know a lot about him. It's a deep passage. And then we come back to chapter 5 and he's dealing with the deep passage again of Christ being that high priest in the line of Melchizedek. And it's almost like he can see the confusion on their face. They're kind of scratching their head. And then in verse 11, he addresses them with a great challenge about growing up in their faith. Now I just want to read those verses in chapter 5, starting at verse 11. The author says, "There is much more we would like to say about this, but it is difficult to explain, especially since you are spiritually dull and you don't seem to listen. You have been believers so long now that you ought to be teachers of others. Instead, you need someone to teach you again the basic things about God's words. You are like babies who need milk and cannot eat solid food. For someone who lives on milk is still an infant and doesn't know how to do what is right. Solid food is for those who mature, who through training have the skill to recognize the difference between right and wrong." The author hits them with a strong statement to say, guys, I would love to expound on this. I would love to tell you even more deeper things, but I can't. Because though you ought to be mature, you are infants. And then he uses a beautiful word picture of a baby. And any of us who've got a chance to hold our child or a grandchild or got a chance to feed the baby, hold the baby and you put the bottle in their mouth and sometimes their eyes will lock in on your eyes and they'll reach up and maybe put their hand around your hand. And it's such a sweet, precious moment as that baby drinks milk or formula. But if you're at a dinner table and a 30-year-old pulls out a bottle of milk and starts to drink on it, that's not endearing, that's not cute, that's sad. Because a 30-year-old should be eating solid food. And that was the picture the author was trying to say. Guys, listen, you're still on milk, you're still on the basic truths, and you guys should be at a point, not only are you beyond that, you should be teaching others. Instead, we have to go back and remind you of the ABCs of faith. And he challenges them to grow up in their faith, to grow up so they can not just learn, but they can teach others. And how do you grow up? By applying what you know. Remember, James said that if you're just a hearer of the truth, you deceive yourself. Are you hearing God's truth, but are you applying God's truth? He tells them they become mature by training. The Greek word there is from the word we get gymnasium. And from that word, you go to a gymnasium and you train, you work, you stretch yourself so you can grow. And he's saying, guys, you need to stretch yourself so you're not like a baby, not even knowing right from wrong. Someone's got to instruct you, but you understand the deeper things and you understand how to walk in holiness, how to do the things God has called you to do. For some of you, you've been in church for so long, you've been part of a life group so long, maybe it's time that you step up. Because I can tell you, nothing will cause you to grow more quickly than becoming a teacher. I remember when I was in seminary, I had A's and B's in every class except for two, Hebrew and Greek. And I was like, thank you, Jesus, for those. And I got through the classes and I was glad. When I came back to Huntsville, a Bible college asked me to teach a class in the bachelor's program on church growth, which I loved. But the master's program, they wanted me to teach Greek. And I was like, guys, you don't want me to teach? And they said yes. I committed to it. And all of a sudden, I now wasn't trying to learn, but I was having to teach. And can I tell you, by the time I'd finished that semester with that class, if I would have taken my Greek exam again, I would have gotten an A. Why? Because when you teach, you learn more than when you just sit and listen. So maybe for some of you, it's time that you step up to that place. Maybe where you lead a small group or a men's group or a women's group, or you step in and you serve helping lead our youth or our children. Step in. Don't just continue to receive, but contribute. Step out. And doing that can cause you to grow in your spiritual walk.